Hello and welcome back to our channel. Today we have an interesting issue that has raised the worldwide community's interest. Prepare to be surprised as we plunge into the surprising turn of events surrounding how Germany seeks the help of China in recovering its economy. Prepare to uncover the enigmatic reasons behind the surprise and that is fully involved. Let's embark on this interesting journey together. As we uncover the amazing story of how Germany is seeking the aid of China in recovering its economy, we will discover the fascinating considerations that inspire this major choice as we dig into the fascinating world of the makers. Is it just about the German economy, or China has a thriving economy? Join us as we examine Germany seeking help to boost the economy from China. Is there more to the story? Then join us on this journey. Stay tuned to discover the reality behind this. Let's talk a little about the history of Germany's economy. Germany, a federation of numerous states of varying size and development, maintained its pre-industrial character until the early 19th century, with trade concentrated in a few free cities. Following the vast building of the railway network in the 1840s, rapid economic expansion and modernization spurred the industrialization process. By 1900, Germany had established a strong position in a number of critical industries, including the chemical sector and steel production. High manufacturing capacity, continuing competitiveness, and subsequently protectionist policies battled with the US and the UK were significant characteristics. By the conclusion of World War II, the country's economic infrastructure had been utterly destroyed. West Germany began its reconstruction effort with financial assistance from the Marshall Plan and, driven by the economic concepts of Minister of Economics Ludwig Erhard, excelled in the economic miracle of the 1950s and 1960s. As part of the war reparation scheme, the Soviet occupying army demolished East Germany's last remaining economic infrastructure. The country was a part of the Eastern Bloc's communist planned economic system. It lagged far behind in terms of living standards. The economy began to strive and standard of living increased. The GDP increased not until this current drop in the economy. With this thriving economy, what now depreciated this booming economy? An adjustment to growth figures reveals that persistent inflation helped push Germany into recession in the first 3 months of the year. According to economists, Europe's greatest economy suffered when Russian gas supply stopped up following Ukraine's incursion. According to the statistics agency, the economy shrank by 0.3% between January and March. This follows a 0.5% decrease in the last 3 months of last year. When a country's economy contracts for 2 consecutive 3-month periods or quarters, it is said to be in a recession. Under the weight of immense inflation, the German consumer has fallen to his knees, dragging the entire economy down with him, said Andreas Schurl, an economist with Deutsche Bank. Germany's inflation rate was 7.2% in April, higher than the Eurozone average but lower than the UK's 8.7%. Higher costs have reduced household expenditure on items such as food, clothing, and furnishings. Industrial orders are also down, showing the impact of increasing energy prices on industries. The persistence of high price increases continued to be a burden on the German economy at the start of the year, the Federal Statistics Office, the status said in a statement. Then to this, what will now happen? Germany should seek help. What would happen if Germany is forced to seek assistance from China? Germany is in a recession, which is hurting the rest of Europe. Germany is the world's economic superpower, and owing to the decline in Germany's GDP, the whole European Union is concerned. At this moment, the only nation that can assist Germany in all of Europe is China. But would the US let it? What if I told you that Germany is in a recession because it followed the US, its commands without reflecting? Let's find out. Economically, all nations are linked. All nations drive each other's economies. All countries must have increasing GDP in order for the country to maintain a thriving economy. Germany, being Europe's economic engine, has a significant impact on the rest of the continent. Although its GDP has had a favorable impact on the entire country's commerce and economy, Germany's GDP has lately decreased. The country is currently experiencing a difficult period, with all companies and commerce affected, and with Germany's diminishing GDP, the whole population is feeling the burden. Germany is going bankrupt, and people are living in poverty. A nation that was once the richest today has more than 20% of its citizens residing in our country. But what if I told you that the decline in Germany's GDP is a result of the Russia-Ukraine conflict? The Russia-China connection is also causing problems for Germany's economy. But before we get into how the Russia-Ukraine crisis is causing Germany's declining GDP, let's first discuss the situation in Germany in order to understand how China is engaged in all of this. Germany was a commercial powerhouse. Germany was known for its extremely dynamic economy, and it's home to 19% of the total population and 25% of the total GDP of the United States. It is well known around the world for its automotive, mechanical engineering, chemicals, and electrical industries. Germany was a staunch backer, but the country is now facing a severe situation that affects the entire continent. Germany's GDP fell at the start of 2023 as a result of the economy's decline last year, hitting all companies. Many people have been laid off and are unable to pay their basic requirements. The price of groceries has increased by 28%. This year's hike discouraged consumers from purchasing items, household budgets were shaken, and individuals were no longer able to purchase non-essentials. Consumer spending has declined at this period, affecting the overall economy. Many companies are in trouble as customers stop purchasing non-essentials. The market's demand has abruptly diminished, and the entire GDP is suffering as a result. Businesses that are still open for business are struggling. The cost of commodities has risen, and businesses are losing money. But how is this related to the crisis between Russia and Ukraine? Before we continue further, kindly like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let's continue talking about China's development strength and global impact now that the Russia-Ukraine war is over. They also did everything they could to assist the US narrative on the conflict. They not only expressed their support verbally, but they also aided Ukraine in its efforts. They assisted the US in imposing sanctions on Russia, and after months of deliberation, Europe opted to cease purchasing Russian oil and natural gas. The Nord Stream pipeline also exploded, and Russia was no longer supplying oil and natural gas directly to Europe. When this choice was made, it was assumed that both Ukraine and Russia would suffer the consequences. They expected Russia to accept its loss and work with the US, and you were stating that the idea was not to live without Russia's fuel. For a long time, they assumed that Russia would have no consumers to sell petroleum to and that it would ultimately come back to them. But things took an unexpected turn when China stepped in, at the same time that the US was imposing sanctions on China. China needed gasoline, and Russia needed a partner, so they resolved to support each other. China increased its gasoline imports from Russia, and Russia's economy was no longer impeded. Nevertheless, he initially had no one to buy the fuel from. He mentioned that they will look for a new supplier to replace Russia, but this is not a feasible option. The United States largely relied on Russian gasoline, and finding a replacement source was impossible. This resulted in an energy crisis throughout the United States, and Germany, as with all other nations, was affected. Many industries relied on Russian oil, and with no supply, many were forced to close. Many companies were impacted. Gas shortages raised fuel prices in Germany, placing additional strain on people throughout the winter. The issues outgrew themselves and the prices increased. The energy crisis exposed Germany's oil supply fragility. The crisis had an influence on the whole economy and resulted in significant losses. Exports were also disrupted. Germany's products got more expensive and demand for the commodities declined. No country desired to purchase pricey items. Germany's GDP is heavily dependent on exports, and rising prices have had a negative impact. Massive customers have lost interest in German products, but what is the path out of the recession? When the war between Russia and Ukraine erupted, the United States was the sole country to back Ukraine. The US stated that it'll take all necessary measures to assist Ukraine. This move had a detrimental impact on the country's economy, but the US also ordered nations such as Germany to assist it. The choice to disconnect from Russia was likewise advocated by the US, but it was more than a recommendation. It was an order that Germany had to obey. We have discussed how the US dominates all of Europe, how oil sanctions were imposed because of the US, and how in a nutshell breaking the connection with Russia became a basis for Germany's recession. All of Germany's economic issues are the result of the struggle that preceded the conflict. Its economy was performing well. Germany was not in a position to exist without Russian oil, yet it was compelled to do so. Do you believe the US should assist Germany? The United States is in a position where it requires assistance. China and Russia are working on dollarization, while US banks are collapsing. The US should assist Germany, but it's not in a position to do so. But it does not imply there is no way out of this mess. China is the only country that can assist Germany climb out of its slump. China is Russia's closest ally, and the US-China relationship suffers as a result. The United States likewise attempted to minimize its links with China, but they now realize that in order to solve their problems, they must sign deals with China. The United States as a whole is shifting toward China. There is nothing wrong with asking for China's assistance because the US can't help itself. However, the US did not like that the US once told you to halt all business with China, while the US's business with China is still running. However, Europe has finally taken a position against China. He hopes that China would assist Germany in dealing with the recession. China can give Germany with solar planes to deal with the energy issue, which will also boost a lot of business in Germany. Germany's economy will be revitalized if China and Germany sign trade treaties. China is the world's final chance, and it must act now to break out of the slump. It must oppose the US while also cooperating with China. Taking wise elections at this time would be preferable to mindlessly following the US's actions. Do you believe Germany will take serious efforts to exit the recession? Will it cooperate with China, or will it continue to follow US orders? Thank you for joining us on this fascinating trip, as well as exploring how China is the only country that could help Germany's economy. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more fascinating insights into the world of Mega China projects.